Hey everyone, I'm Jay.
And I'm Sophia, and welcome to Witches Betwixt.
Today we're going to be talking about everything. Like everything that is going on right now with this fucking DNC and this coronavirus and what we as witches can kind of do about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing something that we don't normally do. Normally, we've been really good with recording things like ahead of time and then kind of like sit on for a while, post it in a schedule. But this is actually, we are recording this, I guess, just for context sake, on March 11th, and it's going to be posted, and you guys will hear this by March 18th. So this is actually a pretty short window of time in terms of turnaround from when we normally do our episodes. But we just felt that everything that's going on right now kind of deserves um, like a current events style episode on it. I felt like we should put out something in a timely manner to kind of talk about everything. Um, so I'm not really sure in what direction in particular this is going to go. I know Sophia earlier you were talking about like witchcraft for the apocalypse or you
Yeah,
know
man.
yeah. Me personally, I don't really think like the apocalypse is happening, but um, I'm kind of the mind that things can descend into chaos pretty quickly if you're not smart.
Well, that's
So
something I'd really like to elaborate on, and we can immediately jump into that if you want to go for it.
yeah,
When I say witchcraft for the apocalypse, I don't
hmm
mean the world is ending right
okay,
now. What I mean is my world is always ending. Um, it's no secret. I've lived a pretty traumatic life. I've had some really fucked up things happen, and I've always kind of had to live in a state of collapse or uncertainty or where there's always not enough and I'm always pushed to meet somebody else's needs. I'm constantly in survival mode. The apocalypse has already happened for me. It happened when I was 5 years old and I was trying to survive that hospital and I walked out different, you know? It happened all the other times when I was cast out from society and made to feel completely different from everybody else and to not be given the same avenues as survive or for survival as other people were. So I'm already here. I've already made peace with the fact that I could die tomorrow and I have to be okay with that. So what I mean by witchcraft for the apocalypse is it's both staving off the apocalypse and working with it. And I mean that in two folds. So like one, um I don't talk a lot about my personal craft and what I actively cast for very often, but because it's relevant, I'm going to talk about it here. I actively cast magic to help keep the world going on a certain line of events that are generally what I view as positive. I put as much intent into that as I can onto steering the ship. So for a long time, I was putting a great deal of energy into Bernie Sanders' campaign. And now with all this Biden stuff going on and all this other stuff, I'm kind of having to change gears. And it's like a very tactical sort of witchcraft thing that I've been working with, right? And basically witchcraft for the apocalypse is when you don't have enough and you gotta make fucking do and you got what you got and that's it. And sometimes the apocalypse, like I said, there's a lot of people who live in the apocalypse already. If you're indigenous, fuck, the apocalypse happened and you're just living in the aftermath right now, you know? Like there's tons of apocalypses and people's worlds ending all the time. Our states of being change. And when you're left in that huge transitory phase between an old way of being and a new, that's a fucking apocalypse, man. It doesn't have to be the whole destruction of the world and the stock market collapsing and people having fucking riots in the street for you to have your whole world collapse, you know?
yeah. I mean, I'm actually glad you kind of clarified that because I never really thought of an apocalypse in that way. But you do bring up a good point that see, I don't. So like when I hear the word apocalypse, I always think I get very tinfoily. I think of very tinfoily people, and and I think of doomsday cults, and I think of well, in the Old Testament of the Bible, and I think of what the world was supposed to end in 2000 with the Y2K bug, and the world was supposed to end. What was it in 2012? Is that what it was with the Mayan?
It wasn't
calendar.
supposed to end. It was supposed to be a great shift and awakening.
Right.
And I actually had a very potent experience that week that was profoundly spiritual to me, that actually mirrored what I was told was going to have happened, that not everybody else had happened. But that's a whole nother fucking
Yes. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, you told me about that. But I actually kind of prefer your definition of apocalypse, and I
Yeah.
think I kind of want to use that for myself going forward because I feel like we kind of I don't know, like maybe like we kind of experience several apocalypses in our life
Oh,
depending on our
so many.
situations.
So
You know,
many.
it's that point where you
Like
feel like it's
puberty is an
all
apocalypse, you
yeah,
know?
like where it just feels all hopeless when it's like you said, like when you don't have enough resources, when you
Mhm.
have what you have and you're not going to get any more. And that could be resources in the sense of like physical objects. It could be food, it could be shelter, it could be your
It
own
could be your
safety.
physical body. Like
Right.
you could have an injury that removes mobility, and that is the death of a way of life for you,
Hmm.
right? All of these
But you
things
can
are
rebuild
extremely relevant. Well, I mean, to some degree, not necessarily. Like I have
or
friends who've
adapt.
had to, yeah, well, adapting you always have to, yes.
Yeah.
But like I have friends who have started to use mobility assistance devices, and it would be just plain fucking asinine of me to expect them to no longer need that at some point, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can't really rebuild from everything, and that's the thing. You can't rebuild. That's the point of an apocalypse, right? You can rebuild differently. You can do different stuff, but you can't go back, right?
Yeah,
It's
because like when you think of the idea of like, oh, you know, the apocalypse happens, we're going to rebuild society. It's like, well, if you're just going to rebuild society, then you would literally just build it the exact same way. What you're saying is we're adapting to the end of society and we can adapt the way that we approach society again.
See,
You
and
know,
I
we
don't
can
even think that society is ending. I know that we're definitely at a huge transitory phase. The old world is dying, along with the boomers, and all of us here, us millennials, zennials, even Generation X people who are extremely jaded,
mhm,
we're all here to pick up the pieces. We have been fucking ready and waiting for this temper tantrum, dumpster fire, baby boomer bullshit to end. And we're right at the end of that, it feels like, you know? There's this tension in the air. Nobody knows what's going to happen. The DNC is stealing the nomination from Bernie. All odds are posed against the only person who wants to give working people a fucking fair shot at living. The
mhm,
rich will never have enough. If there was any amount that was enough, it would have already satisfied them. It would have happened ages ago. We're living in the second Gilded Age,
mhm.
literally. This is the second 20s, the second Great Depression. We are in the midst of it right now. And you the only thing you can do in a situation like that is take back personal agency, and motherfucking witchcraft is a huge part of that. Like when institutions fail you, you have the skills behind you, the people that you know, and what you are able to actualize that or act and what you are able to
Actualize.
actualize, thank you, that
Mhm,
you are able to do.
mhm,
Witchcraft is like Batman's utility belt, right? Like you can pull all kinds of things out of that. You have spells you can work with, right? So
mhm.
like there's things that you can do. God, there's like so many things here I want to say, but I don't know how to like put it all on the table at once.
Let's kind of talk about I guess like the political kind of thing that's going on right
Sure.
now. So the idea of the DNC stealing the nomination from Bernie. So this actually kind of got really prevalent in my mind last night. Joyce tends to follow politics more than I do, or I guess more closely, and I learn a lot of who won what votes and stuff like that. I usually learn them from Joyce. But anyway, last night we kind of had like a I guess an emotionally charged conversation where it was just like Joyce was saying, why don't people care about other people? Like I really thought that people cared about other people, and a lot of the way these votes are going is showing that people don't care about other people. And then today, kind of a whole new light was kind of spun on that comment. Joyce had seen another video posted by AOC, and essentially to summarize the video, what AOC was saying is that, you know, we've got about 10 to 15 years and all the boomers are gone. You know, there's going to be none of them left.
Yeah.
And it's and I don't want, if there are any boomers that happen to listen to this is like, it's not you specifically unless you're part of the problem, but if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not part of the problem. But
I
it's
can
that idea of like that the majority of the problems that we have now happened in that generation, and that
yeah.
generation is largely responsible. And but what AOC was saying, and I think what Joyce was also saying, was that the young people aren't voting. And I know this is like a thing. It almost seems like the youth aren't voting. The youth feel like their voices don't matter. It's like, well, if y'all went out and voted, it would matter. That's the thing. You all think, like, if you all think that, then you all don't vote. Then all your votes don't count. Like, we can swing it the other way.
I think though that like there's a lot of things that don't get talked about why young people go to vote. Because like one, when we do, we're disregarded. Youth have been supporting Bernie Sanders in record turnouts. What has happened with that response? No. We're going to do everything in our power to fight you. When we come out, we are stonewalled. When we speak up, we are shut down. We don't get the option. And not to mention, a lot of people like me who are very poor might need to work 60 plus hours a week. You do not have fucking time to go out and vote a whole bunch when you're that pressed. That could be the difference between having your clothes cleaned at work for work the next day and not getting written up for it, or coming into work as a mess and risking your employment. Because a lot of employment treat people like we're utterly fucking disposable. And on the other point with like the boomer thing that you said, I'd like to draw attention to the whole okay boomer thing and what that kind of draws in parallel to this. When okay boomer is said, it's not to say all boomers are unintelligent or self-absorbed. What it's speaking to is a very specific subset of boomers who are out of touch, who refuse to listen to what the world has become like, who actively perpetuate the issues that are facing us and then blame us for causing them. That's who we speak to when we say things like okay boomers, or when I reference baby boomers throwing a temper tantrum. I'm not talking about like some anarchist boomers or like the queer elders who like literally were out there fucking giving like doing stuff for us to have rights. Like those people aren't who we're talking about here. We're talking about people like Michael fucking Bloomberg, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, old, rich, white motherfucking guys who would literally not care if you and your family died from not having health insurance. Those are the people we're talking about. Because let's be very clear, it's always been about class warfare, not age. Somebody who's poor and is 60 to 80 years old has a lot more in common with me than anybody of any age category who has $1 million in the bank. Period. Fucking end.
It's very true. I'm curious, Sophia, because I know you're very heavily involved in American politics. What's the political landscape in Canada right now? Because I've been reading some articles and it seems like it's taking
If you subtitle this part, just put pained groans there.
But yeah, like I'm curious because I saw like like all the like the people kicking the native people out of their land.
I'll talk about it. So in my home province of British Columbia, there are Indigenous people who have been living up near Kitimat, which are resisting a transatlantic pipeline getting put through. The people are the Wet'suwet'en and the Gidmitin people of the Unistoten area. I might be saying some of that slightly incorrectly, but it's actually pretty close. And something you need to understand about Canada is most of the country is not treaty lands. Canada actually was never ceded. So there's a lot of Indigenous people who live on the land, who never gave away that land, who this colonial government still is trying to quash. What people don't want anybody in the world to know about Canada is that we are still actively enforcing a genocide against Indigenous people. And I'm speaking as somebody who's Métis. I literally am a result of that genocide. So I have a little bit of a position to speak on it. And it's fucked up. Our leader, air quotations, Justin Trudeau, is a lying sack of dog shit who promised that Indigenous reserves would have clean drinking water by the end of his first re-election. Well, that still hasn't fucking happened, and he's already been re-elected again. And they can't enforce the RCMP to remove them from. There was like some little law that they couldn't do. They couldn't violate UNDRIP, which was like an article saying that Indigenous people shall not be forcibly removed from their lands. So the RCMP was contracted out to Coastal GasLink and used by them to forcibly evict Indigenous land protectors at fucking gunpoint. We're talking women, and they were like kids there too, and they were just on their fucking land. And you have our cops rolling up like fucking militants. They have assault rifles, they have snipers, they have fucking attack dogs that they're sicking on these people, all for just not wanting to leave their home. Imagine if you were getting kicked out of your fucking house that had been in your family for generations, and it was the only thing you had left after everything else had been taken from you. You really think you'd walk out of that house and just let those banksters steamroll your shit and destroy everything you have? Man, fuck you if you actually think that you would. And that's what's happening.
There's no way, yeah.
And that's what's happening. It's just the same old colonial bullshit. Canada as a country is just a hollow fucking shell. We are run and dominated by energy extraction corporations, and anything that we want to do that falls outside of their agenda is quashed, is bought off, is literally just, they will do anything. They're just as fucking bad as American media, except
I was gonna
there's
say,
less of a facade. We had a really good PR show for a while saying that, yep, Canada's these good guys, you know, we're a bunch of nice people and we'd never do nothing wrong. Meanwhile, right behind our backs is just continuing in like Indigenous genocide. And here we are now, and it can't be hid anymore. And we know exactly how fucking hollow our government is. And we know that they don't give a single fuck about us. And we actively have politicians like Doug Ford positioning to privatize Ontario's healthcare, Ontario being the largest province in Canada. They're trying to make us into America 2.0. We're essentially an annexed state for American corporations, and it couldn't be more obvious now. And we don't know what the fuck to do. We got a lot of people putting up barricades. There's still protests going on. There were barricades of Canada's CN rail system that crippled transports across the country, and rightfully so. And a lot of those people have been arrested and thrown in jail, and we're kind of looking for where to go forward from here. I personally would really like to see Canada develop a political party made by Indigenous people and run by Indigenous people, and vote them into power and make them run our country and kick the fucking corporations out, because I am so sick of rich people running countries in the world and just trampling everybody's human rights so they can make more money, and it never ends ad infinitum until we're all fucking dead, you know?
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. It's like you said, how Canada had like a great PR thing going for the longest time, and that's kind of the image that I grew up with about Canada was, you know, oh, the Canadians, they're so nice, you can go over there, you can do whatever you want, and you know, you can punch a Canadian in the face and they'll say, oh, you okay there, bud, you know, like stuff like that. And so that was like the Canadian stereotype that I was always kind of, you know, exposed to as a kid.
It's
And
just
then
it's
yeah,
nothing but a lie.
and I'm curious how that happened. Like, where did that even come from? You know? I just, I
Canadian
don't.
media. Canadian, you have to
That's the
understand
picture that they painted.
propaganda. Propaganda. Any country that has a ruling class that
Has a level
is
of propaganda.
allowed to define a nation by a set of values, ideas, and principles is enacting propaganda.
Hmm.
That is it. When you see shows like Red Green, which is a very iconic Canadian show, oh yeah, there, bud, you can just tape anything back together with duct tape there and keep your stick on the ice, eh? Like it's
Mm.
very handshake. It's like a cultural exchange, you
I
know,
think
like
of there's a popular show right now, Letterkenny.
yeah, Letterkenny's fucking
Hmm.
real big. That's a more Ontario
Like a
based
rural
dialect.
Canadian
No, that's
experience.
that's specifically rural Ontario. Because if I
Hmm.
were to talk to you in fucking Saskatchewanite tongue there right now, there, bud, it wouldn't be sounding the same as it would if I was talking on Letterkenny, right? And
Mm.
same thing if I was talking rural BC. Their dialects are different based on where you're at. Same thing goes for like Nova Scotia or Quebec or Toronto or
Yeah,
anywhere.
we have that here. Like you have people from like Wisconsin trying to have a conversation with people from like Brooklyn. It
Yeah.
gets weird.
So like we have this idea perpetuated that we're homo friendly, that nobody ever gets shot in Canada, that nothing bad ever happens. You have no idea how many missing and murdered Indigenous women there are. You have no idea how many people are not reported murdered because they just go missing. We have one of the lowest population densities on the planet. A lot of space for somebody to just never be found in, right? And
Yeah.
that's how it goes. And you're not investigated and you're hushed up and you're never recorded and that's it. Of course, it sounds real nice and cordial, but it's fucking sinister.
Hmm. And I was also curious. It seemed so like back when Trump was elected, it seemed that along with that there was a huge platform for I don't even want to say conservative people. Yes, conservative people, but also for like fucking nasty, racist, Nazi type people. There was a platform for them at that time, and a shift kind of happened in this country where those people suddenly, like, their voices were very loud, where before they were not very loud. They
Yeah.
were, very fringe, very minority. I'm curious, did a similar, and it seemed like in the UK that kind of happened too. I was
Hmm.
kind of noticing. I was curious, did that happen in Canada as well?
So, Canada is a very deeply racist country,
Hmm.
especially the white population, although I will not act like it is exclusive to just white people. There is definitely, I have witnessed some lateral oppression,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of people who are already really motherfucking racist and bad to begin with, who are
Right.
just looking for an opportunity to get their shitty ideas thrown into the limelight.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that you've heard of Canada having their own yellow vest movement, correct?
No, I have not.
We have yellow vests here too, which co opted the idea from France and
Mm.
turned it into an anti immigrant, racist, right wing, fucking pro Nazi bullshit movement.
Mm.
Yep. Yep.
'Cause it's interesting because, this kind of idea of Canada has been, at least in the US, growing up as a kid, it was like Canada's the promised land. Canada's like the US, but they did it right.
Tell you
Like,
something. There is no promised land. You keep
hmm.
looking to other people's countries as a place to run away to, and that's how the whole world goes to shit. If we as human beings are going to make it through this, we have to understand we are a global community.
Yes.
The borders are a fucking imaginary construct.
Like they're
We
literally
are
an
all
imaginary
people,
line.
and you have more in common with any other poor person or any other person of your class, no matter where they are on the fucking planet, than you do with any rich person or
Hmm.
any of the ruling elite who fucking lead us along like cattle for whatever games that they think are important to play at. And we're just little chess pieces on that board. And I very much would like to change that
Hmm.
peacefully if at all possible. Vote for Bernie. He is still one of the best chances to move forward. And there's a reason why I pay attention to American politics as much as I can as a Canadian. And it's because the only people who can afford to not pay attention to American politics are American citizens.
Hmm.
You can afford to not pay attention because it won't necessarily devastate your country, although we're getting to the point where it absolutely is going to now.
Yeah.
We're kind of hit that point of no return, right? But for a long time, you could ignore stuff with no repercussion. A lot of other countries don't have that chance. America instituting different foreign policies for war times and all of that stuff directly impacts the lives of people all around the world.
Hmm.
And if we're going to fight global warming and the rise of global elitism, America is the epicenter of that fight. Your election is the absolute fucking hyper focus point of it right now.
Yeah, it's like a shockwave that's felt around the world, and that's not just me being like I'm an American, I'm an elitist, but no, we're a big player in the world game.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense that our elections set these precedents, and I kind of just want to put it out there, like how like we're like not all boomers or like I'm like not all Americans because like me and Scott, and I can speak for Scott on this, we are definitely not some like gun-toting, pro whatever the fuck. Like there are people here that are just like us that are angry and like kind of terrified of what's already happened and what will happen and then like I kind of go through waves of it. I kind of go through waves of like I'm pissed off and or I'm like scared of what's to come or scared of what or kind of terrified of what already happened or and then I kind of just get to the points where I'm just cold about it and I'm like numb and I'm like whatever, it's the same old shit, it's never going to change, and then I get angry all over again. Like it's a very, at least for me, it's a very cyclical emotional sensation of living in this country because at the end of the day you still have to make money and pay bills and you still have to do what you got to do to live, and it's I definitely feel like a cog in the machine. And and it's true what you were saying about like how you have more in common with any person of your class versus any rich person. And yesterday, I don't know what made me think about it. I was in the shower and I was fantasizing about what if I had $1 million, just $1 million. Like, what would I do if $1 million just dropped into my lap? And my first thought was I'd have to call it. I'd need like a financial advisor because I wouldn't know what to do with that like amount of money. I'd have to have a financial planner because that's just a massive sum of money. And then my second thought was, and then they can help me, smartly like pay my loans, pay that person's debt, pay this person's debt. Like these people that are close to me and that need it. And I was like, I don't think any rich people think about that. Like, oh, got another million in the bank, whose life can I change with
Yeah,
that?
exactly. And like I for a very long time didn't understand why people are like this. And somebody I was friends with for a little bit here, who I met through work, had a just brilliant explanation.
I wonder
Have
if
you
it's
ever
like
played
a
a
I
just
wonder
hang
if
on.
it's like a compulsion,
Yes, yes,
maybe.
exactly. Have you ever played a video game and you get to the end of the game,
Mm,
you have acquired so much, but you really like the game and you don't want to stop playing?
mm-hmm.
And all you're doing is keep like World of Warcraft, right? People who gold mine and
Right.
they keep going as hard as they can just to see that number go up, just so they can be on top of the list, just so
Mm-hmm.
people can know them. It's the exact same thing,
Like they just
except
can't stop.
people on World of Warcraft are not destroying people's lives by
Right.
gold farming. If they're destroying somebody's life, it's their own. That's their choice. And who are you to fucking say whether or not they're destroying their life by doing that? If it makes them happy, fuck you, let them do it
Mm-hmm.
because they're not hurting somebody else. But when you're not doing that in a video game and you're doing it in a situation where it deprives people of life and it fucks the world up, you're a monster is what you are.
I
And it's
just
the exact same sickness. It's an emptiness. It's a hollowness. You don't have fulfillment, so you keep on eating. Or like for me, when I kind of really can't get high from weed that much, so
mm-hmm.
I could just smoke endlessly. I could literally smoke an ounce in 4 days if I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit down and do it, and it'd be done. And it's the same thing because this world And capitalism leaves us feeling hollow.
Mm-hmm.
And the rich people are suffering the same way that we are, except they have all of the gilded mansions to feel empty in while we're crowded together. But the thing that we all want is to be closer with each other, to
Mm-hmm.
really have something that fulfills us, to really have fucking meaning in our lives.
It's like,
That's what's
what do
going
you
on.
do as Jeff Bezos? Like, what gives you purpose anymore?
It's
What
exactly,
drives you at that point?
it's what I said though. Just being on top. We're already talking about people who have gotten to such a craven point where they don't care if their wealth accumulation means that other people live and die. So
Yeah,
what it comes down to
they've created
is
their own universe.
they're empty. They're hollow. They're just consuming. They want to say that we consumers will consume endlessly, but they're doing it on such a wide scale that they consume enough to provide everything for the rest of the world, and they're still not going to be happy. We need to treat it like what it is. It's a sickness.
Yeah.
It's just like addiction. It's just like every other problem that other people have, except because money is power, you can change the laws so that wealth hoarding isn't a problem. It's not sociopathic. It's not something where it, think about it this way. If you become so mentally unstable that you could harm yourself or another person,
Mm-hmm.
doctors are legally allowed to intervene by calling the police. If you are so sick on wealth accumulation that you're going to start starving entire countries, we need laws to intervene. This is the sovereignty of our planet we are talking about. We can't keep playing this game. We can't keep acting like capitalism is going to solve any of this. And we can't keep acting like these rich people are happy with this because they're not. We are all hurting. And I think that's the one thing that unites us right now is there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear and anger, and there's a lot of pain. And if we could see that, we could move forward. If they were to willing to admit and we could call them in and have a discussion, we could still change this. I want the world to have peace. And that's what gets me through all of this. I fight for hope. I fight for love. I am a pacifist. I will not draw blood unless I absolutely have to defend myself or those that I love. And
Same.
I will never use violence as anything but a last resort. So when I say these things, it's a call for us to come together and have a discussion. It's a call for us to go knock on Bezos's door and say, dude, we're taking you to therapy. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we need to guillotine these people. I think violence is just another form of addiction that we as a society have become just obsessed with, and we're not going to solve this problem just by violence again. And you know what? We really can. We can still take that option if it absolutely has to come to it.
I never want violence to be the option, but like it seems that in our history as a species, that's been the only way to make any kind of change. Um,
It's not true. In fact, some of the greatest changes have been nonviolent. Look at social reform. Look at the strikes that crippled corporations in the 1920s.
mhm,
Violence is only used when
as
there
a
is
last resort.
absolutely
Yeah,
no other option.
that's what I'm saying, and it kind of feels like that a little bit to me. Like it kind of feels like that here. It feels like our backs are completely up against the wall, and we're really out of options. And then and I think that's when I just get really really emotional and really angry about it. That I'm just like, like I just want to let's just burn it all to the ground and and
Okay.
see what happens from the ashes. Um, and then I stop and I think and I go, okay, you know what? No, that's definitely not the way to go about it, but we can fix what is broken.
Hmm.
But we can dismantle the pieces and maybe we don't have to burn it all to the ground. Maybe we can just, take away some parts and put other parts back in and fix it as opposed to
Yeah.
just, destroy it completely and ruin it for everyone.
And like what keeps me going through this is the fact that we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
We do still have the options. It may feel like our backs are up against the wall and we don't have any other options yet, but boy, let me tell you, we do.
To dig into the other part of the main current events that are going on right now, coronavirus.
Yep.
So I guess I'll just start off with my position on it, and then Sophia, you just kind of take your position. We'll just kind of bounce back and forth here.
Yeah.
So in Philly, we've had our first reported case. There's definitely others, 100%. We just don't know about them yet. And the way I'm seeing it is this: it's basically like a really intense flu, and that's essentially what it is. Most people that get it bounce back, and they are fine. The deaths that we are seeing are a lot of people that are already like immunocompromised or older. And I'm not saying that their lives are less valuable, but that is just generally the case with this particular virus. It targets those people with those issues. So it targets that demographic of people. Um, I think it is absolutely fucking absurd that everyone is stockpiling fucking toilet paper and like bottled water, and people are fighting in the stores over hand sanitizer and hand soap. First of all, why have you not been this clean before now? Okay. And second of all, if you freak out and panic, it's going to be worse. The thing that will kill us all is mass hysteria. That's what's going to kill us all, is mass hysteria. If you just calm the fuck down and approach it from a place of logic, I think we can get through this just fine. Also, my sister, her wedding is next month, and they were planning to go to the Netherlands. And the Netherlands has about 500 reported cases. And I was also saying to her too, is like, I think Europe is probably going to get hit the hardest with this because everything is so close over there and it's so easy to travel from country to country. But what people need to take into context, especially in America, is if you took America, just the US alone, and like plopped it on a map of Europe, it's a good chunk of it. You know what I mean? So for the Netherlands to have 500 cases, the Netherlands is about the size of the state of New Jersey. So it's not that bad here. There's maybe, I don't know, 20 cases in New Jersey. So I, I'm just trying to give people some context. Like, it's not that bad right now. It might get that bad, but even if it does, there's not going to be people dying in the streets.
You
It's
didn't hear
not going to
about
be like
Italy,
that.
did you?
I did hear about Italy.
I have a friend over there and she's keeping me updated and it's fucking scary. They're
Yes.
getting to the point where it's gonna start. She's anticipating it being the point where they're not letting people out of your houses and they're gonna have soldiers bringing rations to people. So what I'd like to say is that while it's not bad right now, it still can be. And we
Yes.
really need to be cognizant of that and to not. There's two things. There's two sides to this coin. And we always talk about the middle ground, although not between fascism. Fuck any of that shit.
Yeah.
But the middle ground here is this. You can't panic because it'll lead to people doing that shit, stockpiling more hand sanitizer than they're going to use, causing shortages, which causes it to spread. Or
Mm-hmm.
people stealing N9 medical masks from the hospitals where, like, frontline medical workers need them just so that they can casually don them while they're walking around public, also while leading to mass hysteria more. You need to
People are
calm the
stealing
fuck
toilet
down.
paper from my office.
We need to be okay with the fact that you are going to die. Okay? And this is where I'm going to get a little grim. Part
Mm.
of apocalypse magic is understanding one simple thing: you're not going to survive life. Nobody does. You get as long as you get, and we're going to pass on. I'm sorry if that's a little heavier than you're expecting from this episode, but it's the truth of life. I don't believe in one life. I think that's an absurd idea. And I couldn't possibly want to just live my life in fear of death. It's going to come, whether you're 22, whether you're 48, whether you're 69. Nice. It's
Nice.
gonna happen eventually. we need to be okay with it. We really need to learn to accept mortality as a human species. Because if we don't, we're never going to move forward. The only thing that makes life meaningful is that it's going to end one day. If you had all the time that you could possibly ever have here, you may never do anything with it. It's the tragedies and the hardships and the shortness that we get that makes life fucking beautiful. So stop being afraid of it. Accept it. And just calm the fuck down about it. It's going to be okay. Everybody dies. And if it's you, it is what it is. I've been so close to death so many times in my life, and it is fucking scary. And I'm not going to tell you that should never be afraid of it, because even me, who has made peace with it, every time I come close with it, it scares the shit out of me, and it will, because it is scary, and that's okay. It's okay, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah, and kind of like my earlier thought, in regards to the situation in Italy, I'm not saying that that can't happen here, but I think we're we're a very large space, and not all of, and we're not all, you know what I mean? Like we're a very large space, so I think it would, one, it would be more difficult to contain in a way, but also not. It's really hard to say how it's going to affect the US because there's such a large ocean in between. Granted, air travel is a thing that we have now. So I
Look,
don't want to make it seem like I don't care about what's going on in Italy. But I just want to say that that's not the state of things here in the US, and I think people need to calm down about it, you know?
I don't want to be an alarmist, Jay. I'm very much a reasonable person, but Italy has healthcare, universal. Y'all
Mhm.
don't. Y'all are charging people $1,500 just to get tested. Italy didn't, and they are in this state now.
Mhm.
And look at who's running your country.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sorry, people absolutely have every right to be expecting it to get as bad as Italy. And I think that at this point, we need to stop being surprised that what is going to happen. I think that we really need to accept that this is going to be tough. It is going to hit us. And the only way we're getting through it is by working together. You know,
Yes,
like
that's the
it's
key there is working together. But the problem is right now is everyone's going, "Well, I bought 50 packs of toilet paper." It's like, "Okay, well, I wanted to buy one, but so you bought 50 of them." "Oh, well, that sounds like a you problem." Or, "I bought 10 bottles of hand sanitizer." You cleaned out the whole store. How's
just raid the
everyone going to get
person's
one?
house. It'll come to a point where people can do that, and people will. They'll just raid people's houses who have been stockpiling.
Right, but that's just I don't know. I just think that descent in that into that madness and chaos is what just frustrates me. Like if people weren't assholes from the start,
True.
everyone would have enough. And that just it drives me insane. And I
Yeah.
think that's just kind of how I feel. It's more so it's not the reality of the virus. It's not so the reality of it spreading or this or that. It's not that viruses spread. It's going to happen. I know that. But I think it's the doomsday prepping is on such a disgusting scale. It just shows capitalist fucking America at its best and worst because these people and the prices of hand sanitizer are going up through the roof. If you look at it on Amazon, it's fucking ridiculous.
Why toilet paper? It's just for shitting and blowing your nose. Like,
That was my point too about toilet paper. I was like, public utilities are not going to close down because of a virus. They're not going to shut off the water supply to an entire fucking country. They're not going to do that because you're going to kill a hell of a lot more people. I'm like, and listen, you can clean your fucking ass. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need fucking
I'm
toilet
like
paper
not
like
even worried
that.
about it. I'm like thinking about my options, and I'm like, well, we have a bidet. When I worked in construction,
Right,
I've had to do some very questionable things in an outhouse that have had no toilet paper, so I know I'll be okay.
right.
And this is going to come back to what I really want to talk about, what I've been dying to talk about, how to survive it, how to get fucking through it. Okay. How do you survive the apocalypse? Let me tell you, friends, accept rock bottom. I know it's here. Maybe not here now. It'll be here eventually. We all will hit our lowest point. That's okay. What you need to focus on is right now. Do you have what you need? Do you have food? Do you have water? Do you have toilet paper? Do you have all of those things? Do you have a reasonable amount? And
Right.
if you don't, what alternatives can you make? You know, maybe you got some old clothes you don't need anymore that you can repurpose into washable rags.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of things. Magic for the apocalypse is essentially when you have nothing, learning to scrape together with anything. Have you ever played much Fallout?
No, I haven't really played Fallout, but I have played a little bit of like Outer Worlds.
Okay. Well, although the loot system is a little ridiculous, you kind of get the idea when you make a bed out of newspaper with the game
Mm-hmm.
because it treats newspaper like cloth. You start to look at items for what they are and you learn to get your hands on them, you know? You
Mm-hmm.
learn to start eating other stuff that you may not. Maybe we're going to start to learn to grow our own food a little bit more because food sources are going to be a little bit more local. It's all of those little things that you can do to start taking your sovereignty back, whether it's growing your own food, whether it's learning herbal remedies and antimicrobials. Fun facts, friends, if hand sanitizer's out, you know what else is antimicrobial? Lavender, lavender oil, tea tree oil. I'm sure there is a whole lot more else out there that you can look into that you can make very, very easily out of
Mm-hmm.
herbs and tinctures and all of that stuff. Isopropyl alcohol is
Yeah, I was just
much,
gonna say like
much,
alcohol.
much more affordable than hand sanitizer, and it does the same fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I mean. So many people get so caught up into this one model of living, and apocalypse survival is about everything, baby. Looking in trash cans for an empty bottle, shit like that. Not saying we're taking it to that extreme right now, but what it means to survive the apocalypse is to do whatever it fucking takes to get through, to really dig deep and bite through that suck. I've had days where I just couldn't fucking eat because I didn't have money, or a lot of days where I knew that I only had enough for one meal that day. So I starved myself until dinner because I know that going to bed on an empty stomach is a whole hell of a lot harder than waking up on one.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. And I know it sucks, but nothing lasts forever. And when you hit rock bottom, you only have up to go. You're still alive. You can fight through anything. And I had this conversation with a friend earlier today, um, why I am capable in situations like this is because I've already been there. I've already been very close to death. I've already had to accept my mortality. I've already had to fight against impossible odds and not give up. I have room for anybody who's struggling to lean on me and ask for help. But no matter what, the two things that you can't give up is love and hope. Because if we lose those, you have lost everything. You have to have love for the people that you are fighting for. You have to have enough love for yourself to want to get through it. And you have to have hope enough that you can do it. Because if you don't, then you won't. Going through the apocalypse isn't necessarily always about having a clear path forward, but it's about fighting every inch and every nail and grouping together and relying on those around you. And sometimes that looks like some tactical witchcraft to lift up a politician. Sometimes it's easier to empower the opposition to your enemy than it is to try and pull your enemy down directly. For example, I don't want Trump in office. It would be really hard to try and do some kind of spell to get him out, whether it's I don't know.
There's so much barriers and protection on that guy.
On the
It's
president, yeah.
damn near impossible.
But what I can do is empower Bernie Sanders,
Hmm.
somebody who literally would change the game, and I can make the enemy of my enemy stronger and make him in a position to do better. I can put those spells out there. And, maybe you could do some sabotaging spells as well. I'm not going to say anything so that we're not liable, but I encourage you to use your imagination. But
Actually, I brought this book down while we were recording that I picked up a while ago. It's called Magic for the Resistance. It's by Michael M. Hughes, and he's actually the guy who created the Trump binding spell, and he wrote a book which is all about magical activism. And I was just kind of just thumbing through it right now because there are some spells in here that I kind of want to share with with uh you know all of you, and that one of them was actually a candidate boosting spell that you were just talking about, Sophia.
yeah, do it up, please.
But there is this quote in here. I just kind of just turned to this page. There is another. This book has led me to another book that I think I would like to buy, and I think you would actually probably really like, Sophia. So the book is by Peter Gray, and it was written in 2013, and it's called Apocalyptic Witchcraft. And there's a quote from that book in this book, and it says, "If the land is poisoned, then witchcraft must respond." And I think that's a really good way to like sum that idea up, that witchcraft is a response to, like, it can be like, it must respond to this, like, it can't be silent to this
Hmm.
kind of thing that's going on.
Yeah, I think I read that article a while ago because in DKMU, articles like this get tossed around every so often,
Hmm.
like magic and disasters or disaster magic.
Yeah, but I really want to share this candidate boosting spell. And this is kind of just going to be like I'm going to summarize it, I guess, because I don't want to give away too much of this book's content for free because, this guy did write it and everything. I'm not really sure like what's good form when it comes to that, but
I
um
think quoting up to a paragraph or two, or no more than a page, is usually a tactful way to do it.
and I'll share the link to the book where you can find it online. But so it's usually best done during a waxing or full moon, but honestly for me, sometimes I pay attention to the timing of spells, and sometimes if I feel compelled to do the spell, I just do the damn spell because I think it's more important to do it as opposed to waiting for the opportune moment. Um but anyway, so this says, as this may be utilized as a road opener spell, especially if the candidate faces great odds, you may consider invoking the following deities. If you work with deities, Ganesha, Hecate, Hermes, Elugua, and Papalegba. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that other one correctly. Eligua? I'm not sure which
You
pantheon.
certainly aren't not. You certainly are
No.
not, but that's okay. Let's continue.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'll kind of just like list the components. I'm not going to go through the whole A to Z of how to do the spell. But here's the components, and I think you can kind of, based on the components, I think you can kind of piece together how to go about the spell. So you get a glue stick, a printed photo of the candidate, size to fit the width of the candle that you're using, and you get a yellow or white glass enclosed prayer candle. And then it says campaign materials for the particular candidate that
My
you are
God.
boosting. Yeah, this is
Is it
basically a
literally
card.
like the Jesus candles?
Yeah, they said like a prayer candle. Yeah. And usually just because they're like in jars that are just easily to manage. So really you
I've
could use any candle in a jar.
I've seen these for like David Bowie and Lady
Uh-huh.
Gaga.
Yeah. So they're saying like make a prayer candle type thing. And then the campaign materials, it references it says to use power oil, which is something that's referenced elsewhere in the book. So the recipe for that is referenced elsewhere in the book. And then it says incense, so frankincense, copal, or your preference, so just some kind of incense, a lodestone or a magnet, and the Emperor or the Empress tarot card, depending upon which gender of the candidate. And I guess if they're oh, it actually says here, if they're trans, use the world card instead. That's actually kind of interesting.
If they're trans, okay, when that spell becomes applicable in 30 fucking years.
I mean, there are some, I think, like on a more
Yeah.
like local level. Yeah, we do have some. But yeah,
I'm just
so
jaded. I'm sorry. I'm
yeah.
just jaded.
Um, but yeah, and then it goes on to the incantation, and basically the idea here is to create a prayer candle for that candidate, and boost it with the incantation, and there's like some notes here about how to particularly do that. But of course, you can, like with all spells, there is no one size fits all spell to anything in particular. I just thought that was particularly relevant to kind of what we were discussing. And again, the book is Magic for the Resistance by Michael M. Hughes, and he's the one that created the Trump binding spell, which I think I'm going to regularly start doing now that situation looks a little bleak.
We can talk about some personal stuff to do between you and I. I have a couple of suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, honestly, in the end, like any agency that you can take back through witchcraft and any means that you can is apocalypse survival, right? And whether that means like making four thieves vinegar for like, a little bit of protection while you're going out and about, or whether that means, cursing a hated political rival. Like, I think we're kind of past the point of not getting our hands dirty, And I don't mean that in like a violent way. I mean that in like a roll up your sleeves and do some craft, people. Because, like, honestly, I mentioned earlier that a large amount of my craft is trying to stave off the end of the world, and sometimes I feel a little alone in that. I often
See,
feel like,
sometimes I think when I initially heard you say like I'm trying to stop the end of the world, I initially thought it was like a little tinfoily. I'm
no.
like what, like doomsday cult kind of esque stuff. And then now, like especially now that we've talked about it more, and then also in this discussion itself, I was like, I kind of feel that. Like today in particular, I felt so overwhelmed by Biden coronavirus, Biden coronavirus, Biden coronavirus. Like every time I open a new tab like on my browser to do something like while I'm working, like articles are there. Like there's like news articles, and it's Biden coronavirus, Biden coronavirus, and I'm like I can't. It's not that I want to run away and stick my head in the sand. It's like no, I know these are very real, prevalent, current things that are happening right now, but man, I was just drowning. I was just drowning in it, and it just felt like there was no escape. And I was like, what, I need to do some kind of witchcraft maybe just to help me filter, just to help me just filter the thing, just take out the important parts of these things that I need to know, or maybe just help me ignore it for at least an hour or so, just so I can get my own mind back on track, because I felt like I was just crumbling under
Hmm.
this constant, pressure of this. And I always feel, and this is just a personal thing, this is my personality, when someone says this thing is a problem, and I go, okay, what can I do to make it not a problem? And sometimes it's really big issues like coronavirus, or Biden might win the nomination, or Bernie's Bernie's going to drop out. And I go, okay, what can I do right now to make sure this doesn't happen? And I know sometimes like these issues are so large that no, me doing one in particular thing in particular like won't sway anything in one way. I know that, but I take on a lot of that pressure and that weight for some reason. And I think the best way I've realized is for me to take off some of that weight and some of that pressure that I feel is to extend my will through witchcraft to influence bigger things.
Hmm. Yeah, and like that's kind of how I maintain a sense of agency. And like I said, fighting against the end of the world may sound dramatic, but it's kind of not when you look at what we're all dealing with. We have
Mm-hmm.
like global warming, we have like the rise of fascism, we have the second Gilded Age, we have the New Depression, we have modern oligarchy. We have so many problems. It's impossible not to have it get to you a little bit. And I think that another very, very important thing is don't forget to enjoy things still.
Yes.
It's really going to be hard. But when you're feeling hopeless and disenfranchised and disempowered, I want you to remember one thing. That's exactly what the rich and the ruling elite want from you. It's exactly what they want. There's nothing that makes them happier than us feeling helpless. Like there's nothing we can do. Like we are powerless cogs in the machine because that fits into their agenda. Having hope is an act of resistance. Loving people and helping each other despite how much we may not have is an act of rebellion. When you give up, when you throw in the towel, they cheer because they've won. That's what it comes down to. If you can find time to enjoy stuff still, whether it's a hot bath, a food that you like, a person that you love, they're losing and you're winning. When you refuse to give in to fear, when you are ready to confront the future, no matter what happens or what it's going to take to survive, and you are willing to do it, you have all of the power again. It's just one big power dynamic, and it's a mind game. It's the whole of entirety of our society is a game, and it's a big mind game. And you lose it when you're giving away your sovereignty to other people. You win it when you carve out a space for yourself and say, no, you move. And sometimes you will die for that. That's how life and society is. But I would willingly rather die being happy than spend 10,000 days being walked on. And
Yeah.
I think it has to come down to us valuing ourselves and our time enough to say enough is enough, you know? And that's exactly what it comes down to is anything that can give you hope, anything that you can do to lift other people up, those are your tools to move forward. That's how you survive the now. You know, like I have friends who may have money to buy food, who don't know how to cook, who could provide the money for us to make a meal that would feed a bunch of people. And I can bring together people whose hands can make wonderful meals that will enrich everybody's lives. And together we can bring people into that space, um, create something together and have everybody walking out enriched for what we've shared. And all of that directly fights against capitalism, directly fights against what society wants us to do, which is to be isolated, which is to be selfish. When you're working together, when we're communicating with each other, when we're bringing our communities closer and making them more tight knit and making things like police obsolete, they are quaking in their boots and they are doing nothing, is sparing no expense to try and break that up. Because I'll tell you one thing, the rich, we don't need them. If we were to literally take all of their money and put it into an alternate dimension and they could just go live there, we'd be fine. We wouldn't need them. All of the wealth that you generate and you make and we are the masters of this world. I know Hegel gets quoted a ton by people who like to sound intellectual, but it's the master-slave dichotomy. And, you know, those who are downtrodden have the skills. We are the ones who build the world, not them. And they need us, and we will never need them. And when you understand that, and you know that all of the power is in your hands or your athame, then you stand at the crossroads and you invoke your will into the universe. And if we all start doing that, we become a very loud, resounding choir that can push back the darkness and make great things happen. But you don't do it alone, and it ain't going to be easy no matter how many of us come. And it's always going to be a fight, and it's always going to be dangerous. But I'll tell you this, all the best shit in life and all the best stories and everything that captivates all of our wonder and imagination comes from exactly those circumstances. And, you know, humanity will survive. We will get through this. And I want you to think about what stories you're going to have to tell people about it afterwards. Are you going to tell your grandchildren that you gave into fear, that you fought change, that you were hopeless, and that you let the rich walk all over you? Or are you going to tell them that you banded together with other people and fought for the rights of every human being on the planet? Those are just ideas in my head. Your story can be so much different, but we're all going to have stories to tell by the end of this, and something's going to happen. And we probably don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to survive it. People are going to remember what you do. And don't ever forget that. And don't make light of the impact your actions have. Because if you think that your actions have no weight, then why are you doing witchcraft? And why are you listening to this to begin with?
I agree with everything you said, and you put it in a more eloquent way. I don't know why sometimes I do a podcast, because sometimes I express myself the worst in my words spoken versus my words written. I can definitely express myself better in a written form, but you expressed it perfectly. Um, exactly why we need our witchcraft more than ever right now. And it is about standing up, and it is about fighting back, and it is about having agency. Like, I just think in history textbooks how you used to see, like uh protests, not even just in history textbook, but you see protests, people out there with signs and picketing and yelling and this and that. And I'm not saying that not in and of itself is not powerful, is not magical, but there is also something to be said for, just being, in your house alone, or maybe with a couple friends or a lot of friends, and doing some kind of magical working toward toward a bigger purpose, toward a bigger goal, and toward kind of overthrowing this capitalistic kind of idea. And there's just something to be said for that it's incredibly important to have that right now. Now, granted, I was just having this idea, this kind of thought when you were talking, Sophia. I was like, wouldn't it be great to have like a mass ritual to kind of help combat what's going on? And then I was like, well, that's
Ooh.
probably not a good idea to actually physically get a bunch of people together. As powerful as that would be, it's probably not a good idea, especially with an
Um,
infectious virus going around.
so an advantage of my magic practice is that when you're doing stuff with DKMU, often you'll never have another marauder around with you. So we've learned
Right.
to do spells all across the world, without having people be in the same location. So it's actually extremely doable, and I have experience planning them out. You could absolutely do that. You could have everybody do a ritual, but it would be from their home
Right.
to
And
their
that, and
altar.
that was the concept behind the Trump binding spell, because I think it was something like 40,000 witches or something like that.
I participated in that.
Yeah. I can honestly say I did not when it was first a thing. I don't know why I didn't. I just didn't. Um, I don't think I was so angered as I am now. I think it took me a minute to get to this point. I never supported him to begin with. I don't want that to ever be a thing, but I was just kind of like in survival mode. But now I've just kind of been really seeing it's hard not to see what the things that he does, and particularly with Trump. Um, but yeah, I think something along those lines of like a mass ritual, maybe not to necessarily bind Trump or not to necessarily support Bernie or whatever the case is, but maybe just something like to get us back on the right path as a society, or to inspire compassion, to inspire equal distribution, or a more equal distribution of wealth, something like that to kind of set the tone for what we're trying to achieve.
Hmm.
I think would be incredibly helpful. And I think I would even like extend this to anyone who's listening, and if you end up in our Facebook group and whatnot, like if you're interested and if you have ideas and you think that would be a good idea, reach out, because I would love to discuss this with a pretty large group of people and to get something done, because I think like we sit here and we talk about doing magic, we talk about doing spells, and we share a couple spell ideas and stuff like that with you. But what if we created our own? I think that would be something incredibly powerful.
Oh, community ritual would be wonderful, yeah.
Hmm.
Although
Yeah.
there would have to be a large amount of discussion on what intent we'd want to collectively evoke together, because I know
Hmm.
that not everybody jives with my ideas. I might be a little bit more out there, being a DKMU member
Hmm.
than, other people in the community may be, right? Because DKMU is already very naturally fight in substantia, um, do the assault on reality. It's
Hmm.
like built for this type of thing. It's the
Yeah.
purpose of the group is to be the antithesis of consensus mainstream society bullshit, right?
Hmm.
So I'm already like been living that life and fighting that fight for a decade now. It's actually
Hmm.
been 10 years I've been in DKMU as of this year. So a little ceremony, or not ceremony, a little anniversary there, I guess.
Hmm.
But everybody's going to have their own different goal of what that looks like, right? And some people are going to be very peace and love about it,
Or
and some
maybe we
people are
can
going to be
create.
upset. And I don't necessarily want to tone down other people's ideas on that. What I'm saying is, um, we can do a group spell without needing to have one set intent, right?
Right, like maybe there could be a way to make almost like a modular spell package that can be like you can take pieces of like piece your own spell together, but it actually all has the same intent. Because I think it's important to have the same intent when you're crafting a spell like that. Or do you
I'm just
think?
thinking. I know that if you have generalized intent, it can work. So, for example, I'm going to pull some DKMU rituals reference here. When we're casting for, say, July 17th, which is a very big day for DKMU, it's the anniversary of the Chelsea Knot, or Chelsea Knocked. Everybody does a spell which works with the currents of 156 and Chaos and 663 and all of the DKMU stuff, and they essentially work with the web, but nobody has one central intent, but we're all on the same side. We're all pushing the same direction, right? Sometimes trying to get everybody to agree on something is what makes it the hardest. I've never found a group of magicians who actually could sit down and fucking agree on something without like getting ready to throw food in each other's faces. Like we
Mm.
are a very divisive lot. But at the same time, if you provide us a general guideline to go at something and let us attack it with our own artistic license and creative freedom, then we get very good results.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I was thinking, because I was kind of modeling it after some of the like mass, like the group ritual discussion threads that I have seen in DCAMU, because I am
Hmm.
in that group. I lurk, I don't really post, um, but I do take a lot of inspiration from a lot of the way that they organize stuff. And so what I see is like the end goal, like they give you like here's the basic guidelines, here's the idea, here's like kind of like the intent behind it, and how you
Here's
get
the
there is how
day,
you
here's a
yeah.
generalized time.
Yeah, but how you get there is how you get there.
Hmm.
You know, there's no one way to get there. And I think that would be incredibly powerful. And then if people can maybe share pictures or just, or, you know, just a recount of their experience doing that ritual, and I think that would just add even more power to it.
Hmm. And another thing that would add a little traction to this is making it a reoccurring spell. See, the problem with the
Yes.
Trump binding spell is it was a one-time affair. Everybody came out, cast it, and it was done.
It's
If
actually
you,
designed to be reoccurring.
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the guy actually did design it to be a reoccurring thing. I think just in terms of media coverage, it gained so much that one night because it was the first time they did it. It was supposed to be, you know what I mean, like the big thing.
I think it's absurd that like a lot of people give up something like if it doesn't immediately yield actionable results immediately, you know?
I was kind of just skimming through the book here about the binding Trump ritual. If you are interested in performing that ritual, it is supposed to be cast every waning crescent moon at midnight.
Okay, cool. Well, that would be a lot better if we could get behind doing a consistent version of that instead of just like a one and done to cover us for the whole 4 years.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the binding Trump ritual. I was just looking at it. I don't know. Sometimes I get distracted when I'm in the podcast and I'm like thumbing through a book, and then I'm like, ah, and then I get really lost in the book. But I think if we could design something that had that same in that same vein, had that same kind of effect, I think that would be incredibly powerful, and I think that would really bring our community together a lot too.
Yeah, we could shoot for that and see if there's any interest.
I think that would be a really good idea. So, if any of you out there listening, and fortunately, this is going to come out pretty quickly from the time that we're recording this. So, if any of you are interested, please do reach out to us because I already have my wheels spinning about how I want to approach this.
Yeah, I think we know a lot of people who are really good at spell casting and we could get in on the writing and the designing of the spell
Hmm.
because I have some really good ideas.
Yeah. Um, but I think I'd like to kind of summarize this conversation that we've been having, and that the world can take everything else from you, but it can never take away your witchcraft. It
Hmm.
could take away your witchcraft tools. It could take away your spell books, but it can't take away the fact that you are a witch, that you are in tune with the currents of witchcraft. It can't. Nothing can take that away. Nothing can take that away from you. And it is very important to understand just how much power you have, and especially when that power is amplified with other people who also utilize that power for the same goals and intentions. The way that that's magnified is just mind blowing, and it's out of this world, and you can achieve incredible things. I'm not saying that you will that we'll get Bernie in office. I'm not saying that will be the outcome, but it can still foster more progressive ideas in our communities.
And it's
We
not
could
hopeless either. He
no,
can still get in.
he can, but the odds are not. The numbers aren't there. Um, but like I said, it's all very situational, and it's not saying that we're gonna launch Trump into the sun. That's not. Outcomes will happen that are realistic in nature, but they happen for specific reasons. And I think like fate is kind of one of those things that like you can fuck with but can't fuck with all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like don't let anyone take away don't let anyone convince you that they can take away your witchcraft, because they can't. That is the one thing that they will never take from you, and that is the one thing that you will have through this. And I'm not saying you're going to fix the world, or you're not. No single one person is going to fix the world, but their power combined and tapping into that same current that everyone else will inspire change. And it's not just like this kind of slacktivism, kind of keyboard warrior kind of stuff. It's not that, you know, you get out there, you practice what you preach, but you also back it up with this intensely powerful spellcrafting. And I do believe that we will see change.
Yeah. I also would like to add another point here. A lot of people often say it's impossible for one person to make a great amount of change. I would like to present to you evidence that that is not true.
Mm.
Donald Trump has made the world a provable worse place, right?
Mm.
If one person can make the world significantly worse, would the opposite not be true?
I suppose then,
It's
yeah.
an absolute law that something has to have an equal and opposite reaction, and
Mm-hmm.
there has to be somebody who can actualize that same amount of change for a positive end. To say that we have no hope is just giving up. To say that no one person can change the world is provably wrong by the fact that if Jeff Bezos wanted to, not a single person in the world would live in poverty.
It's
Think about
true.
that for a second.
Yeah.
It's not that we can't, it's that those who can choose not to.
Mm. Those that have the power to do so won't.
Hmm. But
Mm.
they are few. They are oh so few. They're becoming less than 1%. Think about that.
Are they?
Oh, yeah. If you look at the absolute top richest fuckers who are destroying the planet, you really think that they are 1% of the world's population?
Hmm.
Let me do a little figure here for you.
I don't know
World
what actually the 1% is categorized as. Like,
population. Okay,
what's the threshold
hang
for
on.
being in the top 1%?
1% of 7.7 billion. Okay. 1% of 77 billion or 7.7 billion is 77 million. Do you really think that there are 77 million billionaires out there?
Holy shit.
No. No, 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 no. They are the 0.01%, maybe even further than that. They want you to think that they're 1%, but they're not
Wow.
even a percent. They are a fraction.
77 million. How rich, like, what's the net worth of, like, the richest person?
I don't know. Jeff Bezos, I think, is the richest right now. I want y'all to just stop and really think about that. Do you really think there's 77 million billionaires in the world? No. No, there isn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is
Uh,
Jeff Bezos. $108.6 billion net worth.
116 from what I'm seeing as of 2020. So to summarize, capitalism is the root of all evil, and we need to abolish the system and find an alternative.
100% agreed. And the way to that is witchcraft. I feel like this is like a it's like a propaganda, it's like a witchcraft propaganda episode. Like, are you upset with the world? Do you want to make big changes? If so, become a witch.
You have the ability to cast fireballs? If so, please sign up. We really fucking need you.
We need you for the witch army.
Oh.
um but yeah, to summarize everything we're talking about, it's like I was saying earlier, no one can take your witchcraft from you, and I think it's one of the biggest tools that you will have in these upcoming months, because it is going to be weird. It's going to be difficult to navigate at times, and then just remember that you always have that one tool, that one thing at your disposal.
And for the love of fuck, never give up hope. Never stop fighting. Never fucking surrender. And just imagine you're a goddamn anime character and keep fighting, because that's all that we got. And if you want to give up and die, that's okay too. I don't blame you. I've been there.
True, but there is a better alternative.
Yeah.
In continuing the fight. So we're gonna kind of wrap it up here. I don't know if this was a particularly good episode or not. I think it was just I needed to get a lot off my chest, and so did Sophia. We were in the Facebook chat in our group earlier, and it was just like I was like, this is just too much. I think we just needed to kind of decompress.
And who knows? Maybe Jay's gonna delete this episode after editing, and it'll never see the light of day.
No, this is definitely getting posted because I think it's incredibly relevant. Definitely. But anyway, so if you want to hear more of us, if this is your first time tuning in, hi, hello. We are on the big three social medias: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is Witches Betwixt, all one word on all three platforms. We all check each one except for Twitter, which is pretty much exclusively run by me, but feel free to message us on any of them. We will get back to you. It may not be right away, but we will definitely get back to you. We respond to all of our messages. If you want to add your post to our online community, you can use the hashtag WBTWXT. And the links to our official Facebook group and website are in the show notes below. And also in the show notes below for this episode, I will include a link to Magic for the Resistance by Michael M. Hughes. It's a book I referenced a couple times. It's like I said earlier, he's the guy who wrote the Binding Trump spell, and also he's got a lot of other good stuff in this book that I think is very relevant to the topics that we discussed here today. And yeah, I think we're gonna sign out for now, and I hope that you all are okay, and you will be okay.
And don't forget to vanish.
We'll see you in the next one.